The sun was merciless as it beat down on the dusty trail leading to Copper Canyon Outpost, but Vivian Reed kept her chin high despite the tears threatening to spill from her tired eyes. It was 1878, and the promise of a new life with her fiancé had just vanished with the morning stagecoach along with the man who had sworn to love her forever. Vivian stared at the disappearing cloud of dust, clutching the hastily scrawled note in her trembling hand. Thomas had left before dawn, claiming a better opportunity in San Francisco that couldn't accommodate a wife just yet. He'd taken most of their money, leaving her with barely enough for a week's lodging at the Outpost shabby inn. "Miss, they ain't coming back for you," said the station master, an elderly man with kind eyes that had witnessed this scene too many times before. "Stagecoach only comes through once a week, and the telegraph line's been down for days." Vivian smoothed her blue calico dress, the fabric worn thin from the long journey from Boston. At 22, she had left everything behind: her teaching position, her widowed mother's disapproval, and the security of the only home she'd ever known, all for a man who had abandoned her in the middle of nowhere. "I understand," she replied with as much dignity as she could muster. "I suppose I'll need to find work until I can afford passage back east." The station master scratched his gray beard. "Not much call for ladies' work round here, Miss Reed. Copper Canyon's mostly miners, traders, and ranchers passing through. It might need help, but—" He trailed off, his expression suggesting the establishment wasn't suitable for a woman of her breeding. As the reality of her situation sank in, Vivian felt panic rising in her chest. She was alone, nearly penniless, and stranded in a territory where women were scarce and danger plentiful. "Station master," a deep voice called from outside, followed by the sound of boots on the wooden porch. "Got that shipment of fence posts from Tucson?" Vivian turned to see a tall man filling the doorway. Dust coated his clothes, and the wide brim of his hat shadowed his face. But she could see he was young, perhaps 30, with broad shoulders and a stance that suggested he was accustomed to hard work and harder decisions. "Afternoon, Mr. Lawson," the station master greeted. "Your posts arrived yesterday. Got your mail too." He glanced at Vivian, then back to the newcomer. "This here's Miss Reed. She's been left in a difficult spot." Luke Lawson pushed his hat back, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind, with eyes the color of a summer storm. Those eyes took in Vivian's situation in one assessing glance: the single trunk beside her, the crumpled note in her hand, the proud set of her shoulders despite the distress evident in her face. "Madam," he acknowledged with a slight nod. "Luke Lawson. I run the Double L, about 15 miles northwest of here." "Vivian Reed," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "Recently of Boston. And recently abandoned," the station master added bluntly. "Fiancé left her high and dry. Took the morning coach west." Luke's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. "That's so." He turned back to the station master. "Jenkins, load those posts on my wagon. I'll settle up with you now." While the men conducted their business, Vivian stared out the window at the desolate landscape. The Arizona Territory stretched before her, beautiful in its harshness, indifferent to her plight. The afternoon was waning, and she had nowhere to go once night fell. When Luke returned, he seemed to have come to some decision. "Miss Reed, my ranch needs help. Got a housekeeper, Mrs. Abernathy, but she's getting on in years. Could use someone to assist her, handle correspondence, maybe teach the cowhands' children their letters when they're around." He paused. "It's honest work, and you'd have your own cabin. Small but private." Vivian studied him, searching for any sign of impropriety in his offer. She found none, only a straightforward assessment and perhaps a hint of compassion carefully disguised. "Mr. Lawson, while I appreciate your offer, I must ask, why would you help a complete stranger?" A muscle twitched in his jaw. "My sister found herself in a similar situation once. Nobody helped her." He didn't elaborate further. "It's your choice, Miss Reed. Stay here with limited options, or take a chance on decent work until you decide your next move." The station master cleared his throat. "Luke's a fair man, Miss Reed. Known him since he was knee-high to a grasshopper. His offer's probably your best bet, circumstances being what they are." Vivian considered her options, which were painfully few. The outpost consisted of little more than the station, the questionable inn, a general store, and a saloon that no respectable woman would enter. Her money would run out quickly. And then what? Very well, Mr. Lawson, she said finally. I accept your offer, at least temporarily. I should inform you that I was a schoolteacher in Boston, so I am quite capable with correspondence and education. Something that might have been approval flashed across his face. Good. We'll leave within the hour. Get your belongings together. An hour later, Vivian found herself perched on the seat of a wagon beside the taciturn rancher, her trunk secured in the back among bags of supplies and the promised fence posts. As they left the outpost behind, she felt a curious mixture of trepidation and relief. Mr. Lawson, she ventured after several miles of silence, I hope you don't mind my asking, but what exactly is the Double L? Luke kept his eyes on the trail ahead. Started as a small cattle operation. My father's dream. Now it's mixed cattle, horses, some crops. We're not the biggest spread in the territory, but we're growing. And your family? She asked, trying to determine what sort of household she was entering. Just me now, he replied. Father died 3 years back. Mother before that. Sister. He hesitated. Caroline's back east. Married. The way he said it suggested there was more to that story, but Vivian didn't press. They each had their secrets, it seemed. The ranch hands live in the bunkhouse, Luke continued after a while, apparently deciding she needed more information. Mrs. Abernathy has rooms off the kitchen. Main house has my quarters and a few spare rooms. Your cabins behind the main house used to be the foreman's place before I built him a new one. The sun was beginning to set, painting the desert in breathtaking shades of orange and purple. Despite her circumstances, Vivian couldn't help but admire the wild beauty around them. It's different from Boston, she observed. Luke glanced at her. Too different. I don't know yet, she answered honestly. But it has its own beauty. He nodded, seeming satisfied with her response. Territory's not for everyone. Takes grit to make it here. I have more grit than people generally assume, Mr. Lawson. This earned her the first hint of a smile she'd seen from him. We'll see, Miss Reed. The remaining journey passed mostly in silence, broken only by Luke occasionally pointing out landmarks or explaining aspects of the territory. As darkness fell, he lit a lantern that swung from the wagon, casting a small circle of light around them. Not much further, he said as they crested a rise. You can see the ranch lights up ahead. Vivian peered into the darkness and spotted the warm glow of lanterns in the distance. As they drew closer, the shape of the ranch emerged a substantial main house built of stone and timber, a large barn, bunkhouse, corrals, and several smaller outbuildings scattered around a central yard. A dog began barking as they approached, and soon a wiry man with a lantern emerged from the bunkhouse. That's Virgil, my foreman, Luke explained. Been with the ranch since my father's time. Virgil approached as Luke brought the wagon to a halt in front of the main house. Boss, wasn't expecting you back till tomorrow. Everything all right at the outpost? Fine, Virgil. This is Miss Reed. She'll be helping Mrs. Abernathy and handling some teaching duties. Luke jumped down from the wagon, then offered Vivian his hand to assist her. Virgil tipped his hat, curiosity evident in his weathered face. Madam, welcome to the Double L. The front door of the main house opened, spilling light onto the porch. A stout woman with silver hair pulled into a tight bun appeared, wiping her hands on her apron. Luke Lawson, you're early. Supper's not quite ready yet, she called out, then noticed Vivian. And who's this? Mrs. Abernathy. This is Miss Vivian Reed, Luke said as he helped Vivian down from the wagon. She'll be staying in the old foreman's cabin and helping you around the place. Miss Reed, this is Mrs. Abernathy, finest cook in the Arizona territory and the one who really runs this ranch. The older woman approached, studying Vivian with keen eyes. Boston, by the sound of you, she said. And from the look of that dress, you've come a long way. Yes, madam, Vivian replied. It's been quite a journey. Mrs. Abernathy nodded, seemingly satisfied with what she saw. Well, you're skin and bones. Come inside and get some food in you. Virgil, fetch Miss Reed's trunk to her cabin, if you please. We can get her settled after supper. Vivian was ushered into a surprisingly comfortable home. The main room had sturdy, well-made furniture, a stone fireplace, and bookshelves that caught her attention immediately. The kitchen beyond was warm and fragrant with the smell of cooking. Sit, Mrs. Abernathy insisted, guiding Vivian to the table. I've got stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. Luke hung his hat on a peg by the door. I'll go help Virgil with the supplies, then get cleaned up. Left alone with the housekeeper, Vivian felt the weight of the day crash down upon her. The kindness of these strangers after Thomas's betrayal was almost too much to bear. Now then, Mrs. Abernathy said gently, placing a cup of hot tea before Vivian. Drink this while I finish supper. Whatever brought you here can wait until you've had food and rest. Vivian wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Thank you, Mrs. Abernathy. Martha, dear. We don't stand on ceremony much at the Double L. The older woman patted her shoulder. You're safe now. Those simple words broke something inside Vivian, and tears she'd been holding back all day spilled down her cheeks. Martha didn't say anything more, just placed a handkerchief beside the teacup and returned to her cooking, allowing Vivian the dignity of composing herself privately. By the time Luke returned, freshly washed and in clean clothes, Vivian had regained her composure. Dinner was a simple but delicious affair, with Luke and Martha discussing ranch business, while Vivian mostly listened, taking in information about her new temporary home. After the meal, Martha showed Vivian to her cabin. It was indeed small, just one room with a curtained-off sleeping area, a small stove, a table with 2 chairs, and basic furnishings, but it was clean and solid, with a window that would offer a view of the mountains come morning. It's not what you're used to, I expect, Martha said, lighting lamps around the room, but it's private and safe. Luke had Virgil bring fresh water for washing, and there's clean linens on the bed. It's more than generous, Vivian replied sincerely. I don't know how to thank Mr. Lawson properly. Martha gave her a knowing look. That man's got his reasons for helping you, though he'd never say so. Lost his sister to a bad situation years back, found her again, but not before she'd suffered plenty. Makes him protective of women in trouble. She patted Vivian's hand. Get some rest, dear. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure everything else out. Left alone, Vivian unpacked her few possessions, changed into her nightgown, and sat on the edge of the bed. Through her small window, she could see the stars brighter and more numerous than she'd ever seen in Boston. The vast openness of this land, so frightening just hours ago, now felt oddly comforting. She thought of Luke Lawson, the reserved rancher who'd offered her sanctuary without hesitation. There was a story there, one she sensed was painful. But for tonight, it was enough to know she was safe, with a roof over her head and honest work ahead. As she drifted off to sleep, Vivian realized that for the first time since reading Thomas's note, she wasn't thinking about the man who had abandoned her, but about the one who had taken her in. Dawn broke early at the Double L, painting the mountains with golden light. Vivian woke to unfamiliar sounds: roosters crowing, cattle lowing in the distance, the rhythmic chopping of wood. For a moment, she was disoriented, then yesterday's events came rushing back. She dressed quickly in her simplest dress, a practical brown cotton, and pinned her dark hair in a neat bun. Looking in her small hand mirror, she noted the shadows under her eyes, but was pleased to see determination replacing yesterday's despair. When she emerged from her cabin, the ranch was already busy with activity. Cowboys moved between the barn and corrals, a young boy was feeding chickens, and smoke rose from the main house chimney. Vivian made her way there, finding Martha kneading dough in the kitchen. Good morning, dear. The older woman greeted her. Sleep well. Better than I expected, Vivian admitted. How can I help? Martha smiled approvingly. That's the spirit. You can start by brewing coffee. The men will be in for breakfast soon. Then I'll show you around, get you settled into your duties. The morning passed in a blur of activity as Vivian helped serve breakfast to a dozen hungry ranch hands, all of whom treated her with awkward but sincere respect, and then received a thorough tour of the ranch house and grounds from Martha. Luke's office is there, Martha explained, pointing to a door off the main room. He handles the accounts himself, but he mentioned you might help with correspondence. He gets letters from cattle buyers, horse traders, and such, but doesn't always have time to respond properly. I'd be happy to assist, Vivian said. I have experience with business correspondence from helping my father before he passed. Martha nodded approvingly. Good. Now, about the teaching, we've got 5 children on the ranch currently. Hands kids, ages 6 to 12. Luke's been wanting someone to give them proper schooling. The bunkhouse has a room we can set up. By midday, Vivian had a clear understanding of her duties, helping Martha with household management, handling correspondence for Luke, and establishing a small school for the ranch children. The work would be varied and engaging, playing to her strengths. She was in the garden, helping Martha harvest vegetables for dinner, when Luke appeared. He'd clearly been working with the cattle. His clothes were dusty, and he carried the scent of leather and horses. "Miss Reed," he greeted her, settling in. "Yes, thank you, Mr. Lawson. Mrs. Abernathy has been most helpful in explaining my duties." Luke nodded. "Good. If you're not too tired, I'd like to show you something this afternoon. Thought you might want to see more of the ranch." Martha gave Vivian an encouraging smile. "Go on, dear. I can finish here." An hour later, Vivian found herself on horseback for the first time in her life, perched somewhat unsteadily on a gentle mare named Daisy. Luke had provided her with a divided riding skirt that had belonged to his sister, allowing her to ride properly rather than side saddle. "Just relax and move with her," Luke advised as they set out. "Daisy knows what she's doing, even if you don't." They rode at a leisurely pace, with Luke pointing out features of the ranch: the north pasture where the breeding stock grazed, the creek that provided water year-round, the apple orchard his mother had started years ago. Gradually, Vivian grew more comfortable in the saddle, even enjoying the new perspective. "Where are we going?" she asked as they followed a narrow trail up into the foothills. "Place I thought you might appreciate," Luke replied cryptically. "Not much further." The trail wound through juniper and pine trees, climbing steadily until they emerged onto a rocky promontory. Luke dismounted and helped Vivian from her horse. "Look there," he said, gesturing toward the view. Vivian gasped. Spread before them was the entire valley, with the Double L Ranch buildings looking like toys in the distance. Mountains rose on three sides, and the afternoon light bathed everything in a warm glow that made the landscape appear almost magical. "It's breathtaking," she whispered. Luke nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "My father brought me here when I was 10 years old. Told me that someday all this would be mine to protect and nurture." He paused, looking out over his domain. "When things get difficult, I come up here to remember why it matters." Vivian studied him, noting how the hard lines of his face softened when he spoke of his father and the land. "You love it very much." "It's more than land," Luke said quietly. "It's a legacy, a promise." They stood in companionable silence for a while, watching hawks circle lazily on thermal currents rising from the valley floor. "May I ask you something, Mr. Lawson?" Vivian ventured. "Luke," he corrected her. "If we're going to be working together, might as well use first names." "Luke," she amended with a small smile. "Why did you really bring me to the Double L? The station master said you rarely hire outsiders." He considered her question, his gray eyes thoughtful. "Told you about my sister, Caroline. She was 18 when a smooth-talking fellow convinced her to run away with him. Promised her the moon and stars." His jaw tightened. "Left her in Denver with nothing but the clothes on her back when he found a richer prospect. By the time I found her, she'd done things to survive that still haunt her." Vivian's heart ached for the pain evident in his voice. "I'm so sorry. Got her back east, to our mother's cousin in Philadelphia. She married a decent man eventually, but..." He shook his head. "When I saw you at that outpost, I saw the same look in your eyes that Caroline had. Couldn't ride away from that." His honesty touched her deeply. "Thank you for telling me. And for helping me." Luke shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Ranch needed help anyway. Speaking of which, we should head back. Days and early out here." As they rode back down the trail, Vivian found herself studying Luke's straight back and broad shoulders, wondering about the man beneath the reserved exterior. There was kindness there, and principle, rare qualities in a world that had recently shown her its crueler side. The next few weeks established a rhythm to Vivian's new life. Mornings were spent helping Martha with household duties, afternoons teaching the ranch children in their makeshift schoolroom, and evenings often found her in Luke's office, organizing his correspondence and business records. To her surprise, she found herself thriving in this rustic environment. The physical work strengthened her body, while the challenges of adapting to ranch life sharpened her mind. The children proved eager students. The ranch hands treated her with respect that gradually warmed to friendliness, and Martha became a motherly confidant. Luke remained something of an enigma, always polite, increasingly friendly, but maintaining a careful distance. He sought her company for evening meals and occasionally invited her on rides around the property, yet never revealed much about himself beyond ranch business. One evening in late September, nearly a month after her arrival, Vivian was working in Luke's office when she came across a letter from a San Francisco cattle buyer. The name at the bottom, Thomas Harrington, made her blood run cold. "Thomas," she whispered, staring at the signature. "You know him?" Luke's voice from the doorway startled her. Vivian looked up, clutching the letter. "He's the man who left me at the outpost." Luke's expression darkened as he crossed the room and took the letter from her trembling hands. "Harrington," he read. "Never met him. Just started corresponding about buying some of our cattle." His eyes met hers. "Want me to tell him to take his business elsewhere?" The offer, so simply made, warmed something inside her. "No," she said after a moment's thought. "That would be unprofessional. Besides, I doubt he'd even make the connection between your ranch and me." Luke studied her face. "You're stronger than you look, Vivian Reed." "Necessity," she replied with a small smile. "But thank you for offering." He nodded, then hesitated. "There's a harvest dance in town next Saturday. Thought you might like to go. Give you a chance to meet some of the other folks around here." The invitation surprised her. "I'd like that very much." "Good." He seemed almost nervous, rubbing the back of his neck. "Martha's making a new dress for the occasion. Said you needed something suitable." Vivian laughed. "Did she now?" "Martha has decided opinions about many things." "That she does," Luke agreed with a rare grin. "Woman's been mothering me since I was 16. Doesn't see why she should stop now that I'm 32. This small personal detail, freely given, felt like a gift. "She cares for you a great deal." "Feelings mutual," he admitted. "Don't know what I'd do without her." He glanced at the stack of correspondence. "How's it coming along?" "Nearly finished. Your cattle operation seems to be gaining quite a reputation." Pride flickered across his face. "Been working toward that. Quality breeding stock makes all the difference." He moved to the window, looking out at the darkening ranch yard. "My father started with 12 scrawny cows and a dream. Now we're running 500 head and selling bulls to ranches in 3 territories. You've built something remarkable," Vivian said sincerely. He turned back to her, his expression softening. "We have. Everyone here has a part in it." He paused. "Including you now." The words settled around Vivian's heart like a warm blanket. For the first time since Thomas's abandonment, she felt truly valued. The week leading up to the harvest dance passed quickly. Martha indeed produced a new dress, a lovely creation of deep blue fabric that complemented Vivian's dark hair and fair complexion. The older woman fussed over alterations like a mother preparing a daughter for her first ball. "Luke never takes anyone to these gatherings," Martha confided as she pinned the hemline. "Always goes alone, comes back early. Says he's just doing his duty as a prominent rancher." "I'm sure that's all this is," Vivian insisted, though her heart beat a little faster at the implication. "He's simply being kind to a newcomer." Martha's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, but she didn't argue. Saturday evening arrived clear and mild. Vivian dressed with care, allowing herself the small vanity of arranging her hair in a softer style than her usual practical bun. When she emerged from her cabin, she found Luke waiting by a buggy, dressed in his best clothes, dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a black vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. He stared at her for a moment before remembering his manners. "You look beautiful, Vivian." The simple compliment brought a blush to her cheeks. "Thank you. You look very handsome yourself." The drive to town took nearly an hour, giving them time to talk. Vivian was surprised to find Luke more talkative than usual, telling her stories about growing up on the ranch and his early struggles taking over after his father's death. "Lost nearly everything that first year," he admitted. "Drought killed half the herd, and I made every mistake a green rancher could make. If it hadn't been for Virgil and a few loyal hands sticking with me." "But you persevered," she said. "That says a great deal about your character." He glanced at her, something warm in his gray eyes. "Seems we both know something about starting over after hardship." The dance was held in the town's largest building, a community hall that had been festooned with autumn decorations. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a golden glow over the proceedings. A small band played lively tunes, and the floor was already crowded with dancers when they arrived. Luke was immediately greeted by several ranchers and townspeople, all clearly respecting his position in the community. He introduced Vivian to everyone, describing her as the Double L's new teacher and administrator, a title that filled her with unexpected pride. Luke Lawson, you finally brought a lady friend, declared a robust woman in a purple dress. I'm Eleanor Simmons, dear. My husband runs the mercantile. We've all been wondering when Luke would find someone worthy of his attention. Mrs. Simmons, Luke cut in. Miss Reed works for me. I'm simply introducing her to the community. Eleanor winked at Vivian. Of course, dear. Now, you must meet everyone. For the next hour, Vivian was introduced to what seemed like the entire population of Copper Canyon and surrounding ranches. Everyone was welcoming, if curious about the Eastern lady who had suddenly appeared at the reclusive Luke Lawson's side. When the band struck up a waltz, Luke turned to her. Would you care to dance, Vivian? I'd be delighted, she replied, allowing him to lead her onto the floor. His hand at her waist was warm and steady as he guided her through the steps. Though his manner was reserved, there was an underlying tension between them that hadn't been present before. Everyone's watching us, Vivian murmured, noticing the interested glances. Let them, Luke replied, his voice low. They've been trying to marry me off to their daughters and nieces for years. Might as well give them something new to gossip about. Vivian laughed, relaxing into his hold. And what will they be saying, do you think? His eyes met hers, unexpectedly intense. That Luke Lawson finally found a woman worth looking at twice. The candid admission sent a flutter through her chest. Before she could respond, the music ended, and they were separated by well-wishers and acquaintances eager to speak with them. Later, as they shared punch by the refreshment table, the town doctor approached. Miss Reed, Luke tells me you've started a school at the Double L. Just a small one, for the ranch children, Vivian explained. Dr. Potter nodded thoughtfully. We've been trying to establish a proper school in town for years. Have a building, even hired a teacher last spring, but he left after 2 months. Said the frontier was too rough for him. He glanced at Luke, then back to Vivian. Don't suppose you'd consider taking on a larger class? Town could pay a fair wage, provide housing. The offer caught Vivian by surprise. It was a generous opportunity, a chance to resume her profession properly, with independence and security. She hesitated, looking at Luke, whose expression had gone carefully neutral. That's very kind, Dr. Potter. May I think about it? Of course. No rush. School term wouldn't start until after harvest anyway. He patted her arm. Just something to consider. We need good people to help build this community. After he left, an awkward silence fell between them. Finally, Luke spoke. It's a good opportunity. Teaching's what you trained for. Yes, she agreed, studying his face. But I've made commitments to the Double L. Temporary arrangements. He reminded her, his voice oddly tight. Never meant to keep you there forever. Something in his tone hurt more than she expected. I see. Well, as I said, I'll think about it. The remainder of the evening passed pleasantly enough, but the easy camaraderie they'd shared on the drive to town had diminished. On the journey home, Luke was quieter, lost in his own thoughts. As they neared the ranch, Vivian broke the silence. Thank you for taking me tonight. I enjoyed meeting everyone. Luke nodded. They liked you. Dr. Potter especially. Luke, she said gently, are you upset about his offer? He sighed, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. No. Yes. Maybe. He glanced at her. Just got used to having you around, is all. The simple admission warmed her. I haven't accepted his offer. But you should consider it, he said, surprising her. It's a chance to rebuild your life on your terms. Isn't that what you wanted? Vivian realized she wasn't entirely sure what she wanted anymore. When she'd first arrived at the Double L, her only thought had been survival and eventual return east. Now, she found herself increasingly attached to this wild country and to the man beside her. What I want has changed, she admitted softly. Luke's hands tightened on the reins, but before he could respond, a flash of movement ahead caught their attention. 3 riders emerged from the shadows, blocking the road. Luke Lawson, called one of the men. We need a word with you. Luke pulled the buggy to a halt, subtly shifting to place himself between Vivian and the strangers. Evening, gentlemen. Something I can help you with. The lead rider, a lean man with a scar running down his cheek, leaned forward in his saddle. You can start by explaining why you bought the water rights to Cripple Creek. Luke's posture remained relaxed, but Vivian sensed his alertness. Fair and square, Dalton. Previous owner was selling. I made an offer. That creek water's half my stock. Dalton spat. You knew that when you bought it. And you're welcome to continue using it. Luke replied evenly. I've got no interest in cutting off your water. Just wanted to protect the Double L's future access. Dalton's hand hovered near his holstered pistol. Pretty words. But I don't trust a man who sneaks around behind my back. Nothing sneaky about a legal purchase, Luke countered. Now, I've got a lady with me, and it's getting late. Why don't you come by the ranch tomorrow, and we'll work out a formal agreement about the water rights. The tension stretched between them until one of Dalton's companions murmured something in his ear. Finally, the angry rancher nodded curtly. Tomorrow morning, Lawson. But if you're playing me false. He left the threat hanging as he wheeled his horse around and rode off, his men following. Only when they were well away did Luke relax slightly. Sorry about that, he said to Vivian. Clyde Dalton's got a temper. Decent rancher otherwise. Are you in danger? Vivian asked, concerned by the confrontation. Luke shook his head. Dalton blusters, but he's not foolish. Once he calms down, he'll see I'm being reasonable. He clicked to the horses, setting them in motion again. This is part of ranching out here, managing your neighbors as carefully as you manage your land. The incident highlighted the challenges of Luke's position, not just a rancher, but a community leader navigating complex relationships and responsibilities. It added another dimension to her understanding of him. When they reached the Double L, Luke helped her down from the buggy, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. In the moonlight, his face was half in shadow, but his eyes held hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. Vivian, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with words. Yes, she prompted softly. After a moment's hesitation, he stepped back. Nothing. It's late. Thank you for accompanying me tonight. The moment broken, Vivian nodded, trying to hide her disappointment. Good night, Luke. As she walked to her cabin, she felt his eyes following her and wondered what he had been about to say. Morning brought a surprise. Luke had already left to meet with Dalton, and a letter had arrived for Vivian. It was from her mother in Boston, forwarded from the outpost where she'd originally been headed with Thomas. Martha handed it to her at breakfast. Station master sent it over with one of the hands who was in town. Vivian opened it with trembling fingers, scanning the familiar handwriting. My dearest Vivian, her mother wrote. I pray this finds you well and happily settled with Thomas. Your last letter from the trail mentioned wedding plans upon your arrival. I confess I still have reservations about your hasty departure in this match, but I wish only for your happiness. The letter continued with news from Boston friends married, children born, her mother's health improving after a winter illness. It concluded with love and a request for Vivian to write soon with details of her new life. How could she explain what had happened? That Thomas had abandoned her, that she now lived on a cattle ranch working for a man who stirred feelings in her she'd never experienced before? Bad news. Martha asked, noting Vivian's expression. No, just complicated. It's from my mother. She still believes I'm with Thomas. Vivian folded the letter carefully. I'll need to write to her, explain everything. Martha patted her hand. Truth's always best, dear, however difficult. Later that morning, Vivian was teaching the children in their makeshift schoolroom when she heard raised voices from the main yard. Looking out the window, she saw Luke and Dalton standing face to face, both men tense but restrained. Keep working on your sums, she instructed the children, stepping outside to better hear what was happening. Final offer, Lawson, Dalton was saying. I'll buy those rights from you at a fair price. Luke shook his head. Not selling, Dalton. But I'm willing to sign an agreement guaranteeing your access in perpetuity, so long as you don't overgraze the watershed. And leave my ranch's future at your mercy? No thanks. Dalton's voice rose. You think because you've got the biggest spread around, you can dictate terms to the rest of us? I think we're neighbors who need to get along, Luke replied evenly. My offer's reasonable, and you know it. Dalton's face flushed with anger. This isn't over, Lawson. He turned to mount his horse, then noticed Vivian watching from the schoolroom door. A calculating look crossed his face. Well, heard you had a fancy Eastern lady staying here. Didn't believe it till now. Luke moved subtly to block Dalton's view of her. Miss Reed is none of your concern. Pretty thing. Dalton continued as if Luke hadn't spoken. Too pretty to be wasting away out here. Town's talking about her, you know? Wondering what she's really doing at the Double L. Luke's voice dropped dangerously. Careful, Dalton. The warning in his tone must have registered, because Dalton raised his hands in mock surrender. No offense meant. Just surprised to see Luke Lawson finally taking an interest in something besides cattle and water rights. He mounted his horse. Think about my offer, Lawson. Might be safer for everyone. After Dalton rode away, Luke stood watching until he disappeared down the trail, his posture rigid with controlled anger. Vivian approached him cautiously. Is everything all right? Luke turned, his expression softening when he saw her. Fine. Dalton's just posturing. He hesitated. But his mentioning you concerns me. Man's got a reputation for holding grudges. I'm not afraid, Vivian assured him. Maybe you should be, Luke said quietly. Territory can be dangerous for a woman alone. I'm not alone, she reminded him. I'm at the Double L. Something flickered in his eyes, gratification, perhaps, at her confidence in his protection. Yes, you are. For as long as you choose to be. The reference to her potential future as the town's teacher hung between them, unaddressed. Luke, she began, but was interrupted by Virgil calling from the corral. Boss. That new stallion's acting up again. Luke gave her an apologetic look. Duty calls. We'll talk later. But later proved elusive. A series of ranch emergencies kept Luke occupied for the next several days: a broken irrigation ditch, a fence dispute with another neighbor, and preparations for the fall cattle drive. Vivian saw him only at meals, usually surrounded by ranch hands discussing business. She used the time to consider Dr. Potter's offer seriously. Teaching in town would provide independence and purpose, everything she had sought when leaving Boston. Yet the thought of leaving the Double L created an unexpected ache in her chest. In the evenings, she worked on a letter to her mother, trying to explain her situation without causing undue worry. How could she convey that being abandoned had led her to something potentially better? That the ranch and its taciturn owner had become important to her in ways she was only beginning to understand? On the fourth day after the dance, Vivian was hanging laundry behind her cabin when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Expecting to see one of the ranch hands, she was surprised when a stranger rode into view, a well-dressed man on an expensive-looking horse. Good afternoon, he called, removing his hat. Might you be Miss Vivian Reed? Vivian nodded cautiously, remembering Luke's warning about Dalton. Yes, and you are? James Porter, at your service. He dismounted smoothly. I'm a representative of the Territorial Education Board. Dr. Potter mentioned you might be interested in the teaching position in town. Oh, Vivian said, surprised. Yes, he did speak to me about it, though I haven't made any decisions. Porter smiled charmingly. Excellent. I was passing through and thought I'd bring you some additional information. He reached into his saddlebag and produced several documents. The specifics of the position, salary, and accommodations. The board is quite eager to secure a qualified teacher. Vivian accepted the papers. Thank you, Mr. Porter. This is very helpful. Perhaps we could discuss any questions you might have, he suggested. I'm staying in town overnight and would be happy to call for you this evening. We could have dinner at the hotel. Before Vivian could respond, Luke's voice cut through the conversation. That won't be necessary, Porter. He approached from the direction of the barn, his expression guarded. Miss Reed has duties here this evening. Porter's smile tightened slightly. Ah, Mr. Lawson. Dr. Potter mentioned you'd been kind enough to provide Miss Reed with temporary employment. Did he? Luke's tone was cool. Interesting how news travels. Vivian sensed tension between the men that went beyond the current situation. Mr. Porter was just providing information about the teaching position, she explained. And inviting you to dinner, apparently, Luke added, his eyes never leaving Porter's face. Porter cleared his throat. Merely professional courtesy, I assure you. The board is eager to fill the position before winter. Understandable, Luke conceded. But Miss Reed will need time to review your information properly. If she has questions, she can send them with one of my men next time they're in town. The dismissal was clear. Porter replaced his hat, his manner still cordial but cooler. Of course. Miss Reed, the offer stands should you wish to discuss the position further. Mr. Lawson. He nodded curtly, remounted his horse, and departed. Once he was gone, Vivian turned to Luke. That was rather abrupt. Man's not from the education board, Luke said flatly. He's Dalton's lawyer. Handles his business in town. Vivian stared at him in surprise. Are you certain? Known Porter for years. He represents several ranchers in legal matters. Luke took the papers from her hand, scanning them quickly. This might be legitimate. Potter probably did ask him to bring you information. But Porter's also gathering intelligence for Dalton. About me? Vivian asked, confused. Why would Dalton care about me? Luke handed the papers back to her. Because you matter to me. The admission seemed to surprise him as much as it did her. He quickly continued. Dalton's looking for leverage in our water rights dispute. You're new, unknown. Makes you interesting. Vivian processed this, both concerned by the potential danger and warmed by Luke's implied confession. What should I do? Be careful, Luke advised. Don't go into town alone. And think carefully about that teaching position. Might put you in the middle of things you don't understand. His protective attitude both touched and frustrated her. I appreciate your concern, but I need to make my own decisions. I came west for independence, Luke, and found abandonment instead, he reminded her gently. I'm not trying to control you, Vivian. Just want you safe. The genuine worry in his eyes softened her irritation. I know, and I value your advice. I promise I'll be careful. He nodded, seemingly satisfied. Good. Now, if you're interested in that teaching position, read those papers carefully. Make sure it's what you really want. As he walked away, Vivian wondered if he was really asking if the double L and by extension, he himself was what she really wanted. That evening, after reviewing Porter's documents, Vivian sought out Luke in his office. He was bent over account books, a single lamp casting shadows across his concentrated features. May I speak with you? She asked from the doorway. He looked up, immediately setting aside his work. Of course. Come in. Vivian took the chair opposite his desk, gathering her thoughts. I've been considering Dr. Potter's offer seriously. Luke's expression remained neutral. And the position is attractive in many ways. It would allow me to return to my profession properly, with my own home and independence. She met his gaze directly, but I find myself reluctant to leave the double L. Something flickered in his eyes. Hope, perhaps. Why is that? I've come to care for this place, she admitted. The work is meaningful. The people have become important to me. She paused, gathering her courage. You have become important to me. Luke stood slowly, moving around the desk to lean against it in front of her. Vivian, he said softly, what are you saying? I'm saying I don't know what I want anymore, she confessed. When Thomas abandoned me, I thought my life was ruined. Now I'm grateful for his betrayal, because it brought me here. She looked up at him. To you. Luke reached out, taking her hand in his. I've been fighting this, he admitted. Telling myself it wouldn't be right. You were vulnerable, working for me, still recovering from heartbreak. I'm not heartbroken anymore, Vivian assured him. Haven't been for some time. His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. When Dalton mentioned you, implied things about your presence here, I wanted to knock him from his horse. Not because he was insulting the ranch's reputation, but because he was implying something sordid about what I feel for you. Luke's voice deepened. There's nothing sordid about it. What do you feel? Vivian asked, her heart pounding. Luke drew her to her feet, his hands gentle but sure. Something I never expected to feel for anyone. He cupped her face, his calloused fingers surprisingly soft against her skin. You came here broken, but you've shown more strength and courage than anyone I know. You've brought light to this place to me. Vivian reached up, touching his face in return. You saved me. No, he corrected her. You saved yourself. I just provided a place for you to do it. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Luke lowered his head and kissed her. It was tentative at first, as if he feared she might shatter, but when Vivian responded, sliding her arms around his neck, the kiss deepened into something that made her knees weak with longing. When they finally parted, both breathless, Luke rested his forehead against hers. I'm not good with words, Vivian. Never have been. But I know what I feel. So do I, she whispered. It terrifies me a little. He smiled against her hair. Me too. Didn't think I had room in my life for this. What happens now? She asked. Luke drew back slightly, studying her face in the lamplight. That depends on you. If you want the teaching position in town, I'll support your decision. Visit you every Sunday, court you properly. The image made her smile. And if I stay? Then we need to change our arrangement, he said firmly. Can't have you working for me if I'm going to be courting you. Wouldn't be right. Vivian laughed softly. Always the honorable man. Try to be, he acknowledged. So what'll it be, Vivian Reed? Town or ranch? Either way, my intentions remain the same. The decision, which had seemed so complicated before, suddenly felt simple. I'd like to stay, she said, but I also want to teach. Perhaps there's a way to do both. Luke's smile broadened. I'm sure we can figure something out. Double L children still need education, and there are other ranches nearby with youngsters who could join them. A small country school, Vivian mused. With a proper building, not just the bunkhouse corner. I could build you one, Luke offered immediately. Near the main house. Close enough for the ranch children, far enough to be your own domain. The eager planning touched her deeply. Here was a man who didn't just make promises, he made them happen, with the same determination he applied to everything in his life. I'd like that very much, she said, then added with a smile. But what will the town think? Dr. Potter was quite eager to secure my services. Luke brushed a strand of hair from her face. Let me worry about Potter. Man owes me a few favors anyway. His expression grew serious. What matters is what you want, Vivian. Your happiness. I want to build something here, she said honestly. A life, a future. With you, if you'll have me. In answer, Luke pulled her close again, his kiss a promise more binding than any words could be. The following weeks brought rapid changes to the Double L. True to his word, Luke began construction on a small schoolhouse near the main ranch house. Word spread that Miss Reed would be teaching not just the ranch children, but any youngsters from neighboring properties who wished to attend. Dr. Potter, after an initial disappointment, came to see the advantages of the arrangement. Better to have some schooling available than none at all, he conceded during a visit to inspect the building progress. And perhaps in time, when the town grows more, we can convince you to expand your operations. Luke and Vivian's courtship progressed with a blend of propriety and passion that scandalized no one, but surprised many. Martha was delighted, confiding to Vivian that she'd been hoping for this outcome since the first week. Never seen that man look at anyone the way he looks at you, she said one afternoon as they prepared preserves for the winter. Like your water in the desert. Vivian blushed, but couldn't deny the truth of it. Luke courted her with a dedication that matched everything else he did in life thoroughly and without reservation. There were quiet rides to his favorite places on the ranch, dinners by candlelight in the main house, and stolen kisses that grew increasingly difficult to keep brief. Their growing closeness was interrupted only by the fall cattle drive, which took Luke and most of the hands away for 2 weeks. Vivian used the time to set up her schoolhouse, write a long explanatory letter to her mother, and consider what a future as Luke Lawson's wife might entail. The cattle drive proved successful, bringing a substantial profit that Luke immediately invested partially in improvements to the ranch and partially in a surprise for Vivian. The day after his return, still dusty from the trail, he sought her out in her new schoolhouse. She was arranging books on shelves when he appeared in the doorway, hat in hand. Welcome back, she greeted him warmly. The children have been counting the days. Just the children, he teased, crossing the room to take her in his arms. Vivian laughed against his chest. Perhaps I counted a few myself. Luke kissed her thoroughly, then stepped back, reaching into his pocket. Brought you something from Tucson. He placed a small velvet box in her hand. With trembling fingers, Vivian opened it to find a delicate gold ring with a small diamond flanked by 2 sapphires. Luke, she breathed, looking up at him in wonder. He took her hand, suddenly solemn. Wanted to do this properly. Vivian Reed, I love you. These past months have shown me what I was missing in my life. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears sprang to her eyes as she nodded. Yes, yes, I will. Luke slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands not entirely steady. Had it sized based on a ribbon Martha measured from your glove, he explained. Hope it fits. It's perfect, Vivian assured him, admiring how the sapphires caught the light. Absolutely perfect. He drew her close again, his kiss a seal on their promise. When they finally parted, Luke rested his forehead against hers. I never thought I'd find someone who understood this life who could love it as I do. I never thought I'd find a man worthy of leaving everything behind for, Vivian replied softly. But here we are. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and surrounding area. Congratulations poured in, along with a few good-natured comments about Luke finally being caught after years of avoiding matrimony. Even Clyde Dalton sent a grudging note of congratulation, along with a proposal for resolving their water rights dispute that was surprisingly reasonable. Man must be mellowing, Luke remarked when he read it. Or his wife got hold of him. Sarah Dalton's a sensible woman. Vivian's mother responded to her letter with cautious optimism and a promise to visit before the wedding. She writes that while she's concerned about the hasty nature of our attachment, she trusts my judgment more than she did with Thomas, Vivian told Luke after reading the letter. And she's curious about the man who rescued her daughter from dire circumstances. Luke looked alarmed. She makes me sound like some kind of hero in a penny novel. Aren't you? Vivian teased, kissing his cheek. Hardly, he scoffed. Just a man who recognized a good woman when he saw one. They set the wedding date for spring, when travel would be easier for Vivian's mother and the worst of the winter work would be behind them. In the meantime, Vivian continued teaching in her new schoolhouse, while gradually moving her belongings to the main house. We should wait until the wedding for you to actually move in, Luke insisted, though the propriety clearly chafed at him. Want to do right by you. Vivian appreciated his restraint, though their private moments together grew increasingly heated. Luke's hunger for her matched her own for him, and only their mutual respect for tradition kept them from giving in to desire before their vows. Winter settled over the Double L, bringing shorter days and longer evenings spent planning their future. Luke showed Vivian his ideas for expanding the main house, adding a proper library for her books, enlarging the kitchen for Martha's convenience, and building a covered porch where they could watch sunsets together. Been living too long with just the essentials, he admitted as they reviewed his rough sketches one evening. Time to make this place a real home. Vivian leaned against his shoulder, content in a way she'd never imagined possible when she'd first arrived at Copper Canyon Outpost. It already feels like home to me. Luke wrapped his arm around her, pressing a kiss to her temple. Still can't believe you chose this life, chose me over going back east. There's nothing for me there now, she said simply. Everything I want is here. As spring approached, bringing the promise of their wedding, Vivian received an unexpected letter. It was postmarked San Francisco and addressed in a handwriting she recognized all too well. It's from Thomas, she told Luke, staring at the unopened envelope. Luke's expression darkened. What could he possibly want? I don't know. Vivian hesitated, then broke the seal. As she read, her expression shifted from apprehension to disbelief. He's apologizing, she said finally. Says he made a terrible mistake leaving me, that his business opportunity fell through, and he's been searching for me ever since. She looked up at Luke. He wants me to join him in San Francisco. Says he still loves me and wants to make things right. Luke's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice carefully neutral. What are you thinking? Vivian folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. I'm thinking how grateful I am that he left me at that outpost. She reached for Luke's hand. If he hadn't, I would never have found you, never have found myself. The tension left Luke's shoulders. You're not tempted? Even a little? Not in the slightest, she assured him. Thomas was a boy playing at being a man. You, she touched his face gently. You are the real thing. Luke caught her hand and pressed a kiss to her palm. Damn right I am. And I will never leave you behind, Vivian Reed. Not for all the gold in California. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright, with the first wildflowers dotting the ranch's pastures. Vivian's mother had arrived 3 days earlier, initially skeptical, but quickly won over by Luke's obvious devotion to her daughter and the evident respect he commanded from everyone at the Double L. He's not what I expected, Mrs. Reed admitted as she helped Vivian dress for the ceremony. Far more substantial than Thomas ever was. I can see why you love him. Vivian smiled, smoothing the skirt of her ivory gown, a beautiful creation Martha had helped her make. He's everything I never knew I needed, Mother. The ceremony took place in the ranch yard, beneath an arch of early spring blossoms constructed by the ranch hands. Every chair was filled with neighbors, townspeople, and even a few of Luke's business associates who had traveled considerable distances to witness the confirmed bachelor finally taking a wife. When Vivian walked toward Luke on the arm of Dr. Potter, standing in for her late father, she saw in her future husband's face a love so profound it nearly took her breath away. This man, so reserved with others, hid nothing of his feelings for her in that moment. The vows were simple but heartfelt. Luke's voice, usually so steady, trembled slightly as he promised to cherish and protect her all the days of his life. Vivian's own voice grew stronger with each word, her promise to stand by him through all life's challenges, a commitment she made with her whole heart. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Luke's kiss was tender yet possessive, a public declaration of what they meant to each other. The celebration that followed lasted well into the evening, with food, music, and dancing under the stars. As twilight fell, Luke led Vivian away from the festivities toward a secluded spot overlooking the ranch. "Happy, Mrs. Lawson?" he asked, drawing her into his arms. "Completely," she assured him, still marveling at her new name. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." He brushed a strand of hair from her face. "When you first arrived, you were running from something. Now I'm running towards something," she finished for him. "A future we'll build together." Luke kissed her again, no longer constrained by propriety or waiting. "I love you, Vivian. Not just for what you've brought to the Double L, but for what you've brought to me, loyalty, yes, but also joy and purpose beyond just surviving. And I love you, Luke Lawson," she whispered against his lips, "for taking in a stranger when you had every reason not to, for seeing strength in me when I felt only weakness, and for teaching me that sometimes being left behind is the beginning of finding where you truly belong." As the stars appeared above them and the sounds of celebration drifted on the evening breeze, they held each other close, a rancher who had learned the true meaning of loyalty and the woman who had found her home in his arms under the vast Arizona sky. 5 years later, Vivian stood on the porch of the expanded main house, watching Luke teaching their 3-year-old son to ride his first pony. Her hand rested on her swollen belly, where their second child, a daughter, according to Martha's confident prediction, would arrive before the summer's end. The Double L had prospered beyond even Luke's ambitious dreams. The school Vivian had established now served children from 5 neighboring ranches, with a second teacher recently hired to help with the growing enrollment. Luke had expanded their cattle operation and started a successful horse breeding program, while carefully managing the land to ensure its sustainability. As she watched her husband patiently guiding their son, Vivian reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The pain of Thomas's abandonment had long since faded, replaced by gratitude for the twist of fate that had stranded her at Copper Canyon Outpost. Luke looked up, catching her eye across the yard. Even now, after years of marriage, his smile still warmed her from within. He lifted their son from the pony and set him on his shoulders, heading toward the house. "Mama," little James called excitedly. "I rode by myself. I saw my brave boy," Vivian replied, accepting his enthusiastic hug when Luke set him down. "You're becoming quite the cowboy." Luke's arm slipped around her waist, his hand resting protectively over hers on her belly. "How are my girls doing?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We're perfectly fine," Vivian assured him, leaning into his solid strength. "Just enjoying the view." His eyes, still as intense as the day they'd met, held hers with understanding. "Counting blessings?" "Every one," she confirmed, "and finding them too numerous to count." As the sun began its descent behind the mountains that had become as familiar to her as the Boston skyline once was, Vivian Lawson knew with absolute certainty that being left behind had been the greatest fortune of her life. It had led her to this place, this man, this family, to a happiness deeper and more enduring than anything she could have imagined that desperate day at the outpost. Luke sensed her thoughts, as he often did. "No regrets?" he asked softly. Vivian reached up to touch his beloved face, weathered now with a few more lines, but more handsome to her than ever. "Not a single one. Every trail led here, to you, to us." And as their son darted off to show Martha his riding accomplishments, Luke drew his wife close, his kiss a renewal of promises kept and loyalty proven through the passing years, promises that would continue for all the years to come.